All right, so first I want to talk about the easiest and the cheapest way to start looking for Spotify playlists, and that's via the Spotify search bar. So essentially, when I decide, okay, I've got an artist, I'm going to start looking for playlists, what kind of keywords match the playlist, I like to start with this list, and I'll write it down for you right here. I like to think about the genre, any potential subgenres, for fans of or similar artists. And the final thing is just general keywords. I think that is the place where you can really get down to like nitty-gritty niche playlists where you're really going to find those active influencers that are going to affect the algorithm, but you're also going to find playlists that are probably hit up a lot less, and it's more likely that they're going to respond to you and be open to hearing new music. But sometimes it's just easier to start with genre, and so I say let's do that. So I'll take one of my artists besides Daniel, and he's very much folk, very acoustic-y, but folk is a good way to start. So before you dive in, I think it's really important to just kind of get your database up here alongside the Spotify program, and I even shortened this little thing right here just to give me a little bit of extra room. That way you can, instead of having to tab back and forth, it's really easy to just kind of copy and paste and figure it out that way. All that to say, I already typed in folk into the search bar, and what you want to do is you want to scroll down to playlists, and what you want to start looking for are playlists that you think you can hunt down the person. So the thing about Spotify is that for the most part, contact information is hidden unless the user wants to make it known or unless the user is connected to Facebook. So essentially, when I take a look at this first row, this one is actually Danny's personal account, and these three are Spotify. So none of those can really be useful. Any of the Spotify ones, just ignore. You're going after independent playlists. So let's scroll down a little bit and let's find an actual name that we think we can look up. So the first one I see is Natty Martinez. But unfortunately, it's Folklore Argentino, which, besides Daniel, definitely doesn't fall under. All I have to say, I say we just do an example and pretend like this is in a playlist that makes a lot of sense for them, and let's dig in. So the first thing you want to do is click on it, obviously, take a look at it. Again, you want to make sure the playlist makes sense. A lot of times, though, I'll still collect the data because it never hurts to have too much data and too much playlists as long as it makes sense in your database. So the next thing you could do is essentially click on Natty Martinez, and you've got a picture with the name, which usually means that this is connected to a Facebook account, which makes our job super easy. So the next thing you want to do is you want to go to Facebook. Now, obviously, this requires you to have a Facebook account, but from there, it's really about just looking them up. And starting to scroll down till you see this picture. Now, sometimes the Spotify database can be a little dated, so if you find a similar picture, it helps a lot to just keep an eye on the faces if you can kind of tell. But that said, it's really just the grind of scrolling through. Now, I do think that Natty Martinez is probably a very common name, so it's going to be very difficult for you to find her, I think. But it doesn't hurt to go ahead and scroll through and just see if you can find her. All right, so I have scrolled probably through 1,000 different Natty Martinez. Super common name. And at this point, if you're really diligent and you want to keep hunting, I say just keep hunting. I've definitely dived in very deep to find these people. But But all I have to say, I say we go back and we try to find a different playlist that we might have a little bit more luck finding them. So if you can keep your place on the playlist screen, it's easier. But if not, just click on it again. And let's scroll through. And you know what? Here's actually a really great example. Folk Indie Chill. So essentially, you just see this number, and your first inclination is probably like, okay, we're not going to be able to find them. But sometimes the numbers actually are connected to Facebook accounts as well. So what I do is click on it, and all of a sudden, you see a name right here. So the number is totally worth clicking on. And fortunately, they already did the work for us. So their Instagram account is this right here. So that essentially means that we don't have to dig through the Facebook database and search Facebook for this person. It also means that they're probably more open to receiving music, which is awesome. So from here, what I'll do is just obviously dump the info in, which only takes a few seconds. Put the followers, the name, oops. And then from there, just the Instagram. Easy. So let's see if we can find another one that we're going to have to look up on Facebook. Here's one right here, but again, the playlist doesn't make any sense. That's a problem sometimes with these more generic and vague genres, is you're going to find a lot of playlists that don't really make a whole lot of sense. You're also going to find a lot of Spotify playlists the more broad you go. That's why I advocate for kind of coming up with a few different subgenres if you can. Here's another one, Irish folk rock. Obviously, that's not one either. But you know what? Here's one that kind of works. Saturday morning, which, you know, might work out. Just taking a look at the artists, I definitely think that the songs for Besides Daniel make sense. And we got a unique name, too, so we might be able to find this person. Now, I do want to say, I'm not going to pretend like looking these people up on Facebook isn't super creepy, because in a small way it is. But to be honest with you, if you're hungry and you want to get out there and you want to succeed, sometimes this is what it takes. And believe it or not, I reach out to a lot of these people on Facebook and they don't really mind or care. You know, some of it takes some explaining, like, you know, how did you find me, etc. But most of the time, it doesn't really matter. Very rarely do I have somebody ask me not to hit them up. So obviously we found her super quickly. Thank God for unique names. I think that it's important to always, you know, she has a very interesting name, so you have to make sure too that if they live in another country, that if you need to use Google Translate when you message them, you do that. But we'll get into that later. Obviously, she's from California, so it works anyways. So great, we found her Facebook. So it's the same process as before, except this time, this is going to be our contact information. And I like to just dump this in first. Go back to the actual playlist. And it's as easy as, well, pie, I guess. So she's actually got some pretty decent followers. All right, so obviously not rocket science. I think it takes a little know-how to understand that you can actually like look these people up. It took me a minute to be like, oh wow, these are actually connected to Facebook accounts. The real difficulty here is the amount of work. It takes a long time to get through all of these and go through them. And that is something that you're going to have to decide whether or not you want to pour your time into, but I think it's 100% worth it. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is the keywords, which I think you're going to find a lot more effective with this sort of research when finding playlists, especially since it can be more related to a particular song than the overall genre of an act. So in this case, the song that we're going to talk about is a song called Learn How to Fight by Besides Daniel, which is about his fiance leaving him. It's super upsetting, very depressing. If any of you have been through a breakup, You've probably listened to a couple of songs that helped you get through it, and those are the playlists that we want to find. So a couple of words I quickly came up with was breakup, sad, depressing. And I think we should just start with breakup. So just like before, instead of folk, we're going to type in breakup. We're going to go to playlists, and we're going to do the same exact thing. This first row, these names right here, they're 9 times out of 10, they're not connected to an account, but sometimes they are. So it's worth clicking on and seeing, especially sometimes they'll just add an Instagram account or contact information up here. But in this case, we do see a name. So let's click on the name, Renee Wan, and let's see if we can quickly find her. All right, so again, keep in mind that it's not always going to be that exact picture. So if you see somebody who might be her, then it's always worth keeping an eye out. And if you can't even see their face, sometimes I just click just to get a closer look, and you can kind of look down here. I would actually garner to say this is probably her. You know, it probably, again, I know how creepy this is. I'm clicking through, but clearly this is the same person, or at least they enjoy the same frame of glasses. So all that to say, I think we found her, which is super awesome. That was actually really easy. So let's go ahead and again, dump it in there. If you saw me click on the wrong sheet, that was actually my full database. Let's see. Now we'll get into this later, but the one thing you really want to do before you actually pitch them is to make sure that your song actually does fit the playlist. You know, we're talking about a sad, folky song, and right now I can already see that there's Justin Bieber, Adele, there's much more pop-oriented stuff. So Danny might actually not make a lot of sense, and I would garner to say that the genre of this playlist is pop. But we'll get into that later when I show you sort of the best course of action when it comes to pitching. All right, just going back, here's another one, Matt Johnson. This guy, he's actually an artist. He's probably even more likely to communicate with you. You know, the playlists are here. They exist, and there's a lot of people that, you know, you can find their information fairly quickly. JD, who is clearly a grandmother, she might be a little bit more computer illiterate. It might be harder to get a hold of her, but still worth reaching out to. And I'll say this too, these smaller playlists, granted Danny's not country, but these smaller playlists sometimes are even better, because what happens is that these bigger playlists are getting hit up so often, they sort of start inundating their playlist with songs that don't really make sense anymore. So their users or followers stop listening, but these smaller playlists definitely have a more active fan base because they're not getting hit up as much. Then of course you hit them up, and you know, sometimes that spirals out of control, but it's totally worth hitting up 1,700 followers. Sometimes I even go down as low as 250. I'll find a playlist with 250 followers will still get an artist 300 or 400 streams every month, and they're not getting hit up by anybody. So all I have to say, that's sort of the ins and outs of looking up playlists via Spotify. Next, we'll talk about Chartmetric and some other ways that we can find playlists.